Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. The moment a quiet person decides to speak, the whole room remembers they have ears. Chosen one. That's exactly what happened when you finally opened your mouth. The atmosphere didn't just shift, it tilted. People froze like someone had unplugged their reality. You could practically hear their internal systems buffering, trying to process the fact that the person they relied on to stay silent just upgraded their entire operating mode. And here's the fact they'll never admit out loud. Studies show that people remember emotionally charged truths 5 times longer than neutral ones. So when you spoke up, you didn't just drop words. You dropped something their minds couldn't delete, even if they wanted to. You became the pop-up notification they can't close. Your voice didn't just enter the room. It rearranged the furniture, turned off the background noise, and reminded everyone that you've been observing, calculating, and choosing your moment with the patience of a seasoned sniper. And when you finally fired, whew, some people discovered their guilt had faster reflexes than their excuses. The beauty of it all? You didn't even raise your voice. You just raised the truth. And suddenly, the people who were so comfortable around your silence looked like they were auditioning for a panic documentary. And let's be honest, half of them weren't even upset at what you said. They were upset that you, of all people, had the audacity to stop being the emotional furniture they leaned on. Now the same people who once told you to speak your mind are filing emotional noise complaints because you finally did. But this moment, this exact moment, is where your story shifts. Because when a chosen one speaks after years of watching, listening, and decoding, the world doesn't stay the same. It can't. Your voice became the plot twist they never prepared for, the truth serum they didn't consent to, and the wake-up call they wish they could hit snooze on. And the funniest part, you weren't even trying to cause chaos. You were just being honest. But sometimes honesty is the loudest explosion of all. Number 1, you didn't speak up. You broke a system that depended on your silence. When you finally spoke, it didn't just surprise people. It exposed the entire structure they built around you. For a long time, certain individuals benefited from you being quiet, agreeable, and easy to overlook. Your silence made life simple for them. They could twist stories, exaggerate their importance, shift blame, and maintain control without ever being challenged. They assumed you'd never disrupt the setup they were so comfortable with. But the day you opened your mouth, everything they used to hide behind got dragged into the light. Not because you were loud, but because you were truthful. And truth, when spoken by someone who has been quiet for years, hits like a wrecking ball. It forces people to confront the roles they played, the games they ran, and the narratives they crafted behind closed doors. Your voice became the reset button they prayed you'd never press. What made it so disruptive wasn't just what you said, it was who said it. They spent so long underestimating you that they never considered you were paying attention the whole time. Your silence wasn't empty. It was filled with awareness. You saw things they thought you were too distracted or too soft to catch. So when you finally spoke, you didn't just defend yourself. You exposed the imbalance they built their confidence on. Some people panicked, not because your words were harsh, but because they were accurate. They knew once you broke your silence, others would start questioning things too. Your voice encouraged courage in people who were also scared to speak. Suddenly, the system that relied on fear, manipulation, or fake peace started shaking. Your voice didn't create the cracks, it revealed them. You simply made the truth undeniable. And the funniest part? They still can't decide what shocked them more, that you finally spoke or that your words carried enough power to rearrange the whole playing field. Number 2, the moment you told the truth, you exposed how many lies others were living in. When you finally told the truth, it wasn't just a moment of clarity for you. It was a reality check for everyone around you. Your honesty worked like a mirror people weren't prepared to look into. It revealed the cracks they plastered over, the stories they rehearsed, and the comfortable illusions they built to avoid facing themselves. The truth didn't damage them. It simply highlighted the falsehoods they were already standing on. Some people build entire identities around avoiding accountability. They create versions of events that make them look innocent, wise, or superior. And as long as no one challenges them, they get away with it. Your truth threatened that. It exposed the shortcuts, the manipulation, and the convenient rewrites of history they depended on. Suddenly their confidence looked shaky, their stories didn't align, and their excuses had holes they couldn't patch fast enough. What stung them wasn't that you spoke. It was that your truth connected dots they prayed no one would ever connect. You didn't dig for dirt or expose secrets. You simply said what was real. And reality is threatening to people who survive on performance. They expected you to keep the peace. They expected you to stay quiet to protect the image they curated. But your honesty showed that peace built on lies is just delayed chaos. And the funniest part? Many of the lies they lived in were never about protecting themselves. They were about controlling how others saw you. They twisted things to make you look less aware, less capable, or less deserving. When you told the truth, you didn't just clear your name. You cleared the fog they created to keep you doubting yourself. Your words forced them to confront the difference between the image they projected and the reality they avoided. Some people crumble when faced with truth, because truth requires growth, and growth requires humility. Your honesty proved they had neither. By telling the truth, you didn't destroy anything. You simply revealed what was already falling apart behind the scenes. Number 3. Your courage didn't create conflict. It revealed the conflict people hid under politeness. When you finally spoke up, it didn't start fights. It illuminated what was already simmering beneath the surface. People love to wrap tension in polite smiles, nods, and half-hearted agreements. They assume that as long as words are measured and the surface looks calm, nothing is wrong. But true courage doesn't need to shout. It simply shows up and says what everyone else is avoiding. And the moment you did that, all the hidden conflicts, unspoken grudges, and buried frustrations became impossible to ignore. What made your action so powerful was that you weren't trying to attack anyone. You weren't stirring drama for attention. You were being real. And realness has a way of forcing others to confront their own dishonesty, their manipulations, and their pretenses. The politeness they relied on as a shield suddenly became meaningless. Your words exposed what they were carefully hiding behind smiles, small talk, and surface-level civility. The tension they thought was invisible was now glaring in the room, undeniable and uncomfortable. People don't like conflict. They avoid it at almost any cost. But what they really fear is exposure. They fear the truth coming to light because it forces them to deal with things they've been ignoring or pretending don't exist. When you spoke, you didn't create conflict. You simply pulled the curtain back. Suddenly, the quiet resentments, the hidden insecurities, and the subtle power plays were all visible. You didn't initiate the battle. You just made it impossible for everyone to keep pretending the battlefield wasn't there. Your courage reminded everyone that pretending is a trap. It's a trap that keeps them stuck in patterns of avoidance, denial, and false harmony. And the most fascinating thing? They often blame you for the discomfort when, in reality, you only shined a light on what they were already living in. By choosing honesty over comfort, you didn't start the fight. You revealed the war everyone else was too polite or too scared to admit. Number 4. They weren't scared of your words. They were terrified that others would finally hear them. When you spoke, it wasn't just a matter of expressing yourself. It was a seismic shift in the way people saw reality. Your words carried weight because they reflected honesty that had been missing, clarity that had been avoided, and awareness that had been underestimated. But what truly shook people wasn't the content of your message. It was the possibility that others might start thinking the same way, questioning the same lies and refusing to stay silent. Your courage became a spark that could ignite awareness in everyone around you, and that scared people more than anything else. They realized that once one person steps into the truth, it's almost impossible to contain its spread, because your truth wasn't just personal, it was contagious. Every sentence you spoke carried a subtle permission for others to wake up, speak up, and stop pretending. It challenged the invisible rules they had been following. Stay quiet, don't upset the balance, don't rock the boat. Your voice didn't just break the quiet, it shattered the illusion that silence equals safety. Suddenly, people could see that the comfort they clung to depended on everyone else staying small, unquestioning, and unaware. Your honesty gave them a choice. Keep living in denial or confront reality themselves. And that's why it hit so hard. They weren't afraid of confrontation. They were afraid of accountability spreading. Your truth had the power to trigger a chain reaction, revealing cracks in their carefully constructed worlds. You didn't just expose your own perspective. You exposed the possibility that other people could also see, think, and act for themselves. That fear, the fear of a domino effect, is what made them panic. You didn't just speak. You became a signal that silence is no longer the default, that authenticity matters, and that once truth starts moving, it refuses to be contained. And in that moment, their panic wasn't about you. It was about everyone else who might now follow your lead. Number 5, speaking up made you dangerous because it proved you were no longer programmable. When you finally spoke your truth, something fundamental shifted, not just in how others saw you, but in how they could no longer use you. Before that moment, people operated with the quiet confidence that you were predictable. They assumed you would keep absorbing, keep tolerating, keep adjusting yourself to make everyone else comfortable. You had been the person who kept the peace, held back your opinions, and stayed agreeable even when you didn't feel understood. To them, that meant you were safe to handle, manageable, easy to influence. But the second you spoke up, you broke that entire pattern. You showed them you were no longer someone they could mentally script. Your thoughts were your own. Your boundaries were real. Your voice had a backbone they never expected, and that scared them, not because you turned into someone harsh or difficult, but because you became someone they could no longer mold into whatever version served their interests. People who benefit from your silence always fear the moment you step into your autonomy. It means they lose the access they once took for granted. They lose the ability to predict your reactions or control your narrative. You're no longer responding on their terms, you're responding on your own. That shift disrupts everything for them. Suddenly they have to meet you as an equal, not as someone they can sway with guilt, confusion, or manipulation. The truth is, when you stop being programmable, you stop being a character in their script. You become the author of your own. And that's when people's real feelings start to show, because they realize you're not operating from obligation anymore. You're operating from awareness. You're operating from self-respect. You're operating from clarity. Speaking up didn't just inform them, it warned them. It told them you're done being predictable, done being manageable, and done being the silent background to their comfort. You didn't become dangerous because you changed. You became dangerous because you finally became yourself. Number 6, your honesty forced the masks to fall off people who swore they were for you. When you spoke your truth, it wasn't just about sharing your perspective. It acted like a spotlight on the people around you. Some of them had spent years pretending to support you, claiming loyalty or acting like allies, but their words were hollow. They were comfortable when your silence served their convenience. The moment you spoke up, their facades couldn't hold. Masks slipped, smiles faltered, excuses stumbled, and the people who were only for you when it suited them suddenly revealed themselves. Your honesty didn't just uncover their intentions, it highlighted the gap between what they said and who they really were. Your truth separated loyalty from proximity. It revealed who would stick around, not because it benefited them, but because they genuinely stood with you. It showed who was committed to your journey and who was simply present to watch, comment, or take advantage. Some people were only close to you because your quietness made them comfortable, not because they respected or believed in you. Once your words drew a line, that proximity no longer meant anything. Being physically near you didn't equate to being emotionally or morally aligned with you. This was a turning point, a moment of undeniable clarity. People who had been hiding behind words like, "I'm with you," suddenly had no cover. Their true intentions were exposed, and it became painfully clear who was authentic and who was performative. Your honesty demanded that people either meet you at the level of truth or step aside. By simply refusing to compromise your integrity, you filtered your circle. You didn't push anyone away. You just cleared the space for those who were genuinely loyal, leaving no room for pretenders. The masks fell, the smoke cleared, and everyone had to see exactly where they stood. Your honesty didn't just speak, it revealed. It separated the real from the fake and created a space where only genuine connection could survive. Number 7. You didn't just disrupt their comfort, you disrupted their control narrative. When you finally spoke, it wasn't just a minor inconvenience for the people around you. It was a full-scale interruption of the story they had carefully built. They had a version of events, a version of you, and a version of reality that worked perfectly in their favor. Everything made sense only as long as you remained silent. Your quietness wasn't neutral. It was a tool they relied on to justify their behavior, manipulate perception, and maintain power. Every half-truth, every omission, every manipulated fact depended on you staying in your assigned role, compliant, quiet, predictable. By speaking up, you pulled the rug out from under that control. You refused to be a supporting actor in their narrative. Suddenly, their version of the story didn't hold up. The lies, exaggerations, and manipulations that had seemed invisible were now glaringly obvious. They could no longer use your silence as a stamp of approval. Every word you spoke challenged the assumptions they were banking on, and with that, the carefully constructed illusion of control began to crumble. People often confuse disruption with chaos, but what you did was much more precise. You didn't randomly cause discomfort. You broke the structure they had built to manipulate perception. Your voice didn't just exist in the room. It challenged the framework of their influence. The stability they relied on, the sense of dominance they enjoyed, all depended on you staying quiet, and now you weren't. The most powerful part of it. They couldn't get you back into their story. You weren't playing by their rules anymore. You had become a living contradiction to everything they thought they could manage. Every justification they had falls apart when confronted with your truth. By speaking up, you didn't just upset people. You tore apart the framework of control they depended on, and there was no way to rebuild it. Your silence was their safety net, and your voice shattered it. Number 8, people didn't get angry because you were wrong. They got angry because you were right. The reactions you saw, the defensiveness, the sudden coldness, the irritation that came out of nowhere, had nothing to do with you being mistaken. In fact, their strongest reactions came from the parts of your truth that hit too close to home. Accuracy has a way of exposing people, not with violence, but with precision. When you spoke, you didn't exaggerate, you didn't attack, and you didn't twist anything. You simply stated what was real, and that alone was enough to shake people who were used to hiding behind their own narratives. Insecure people can handle disagreements. They can handle misunderstandings. What they can't handle is being seen clearly. Your truth stripped away the excuses they had been hiding behind. It cornered them into acknowledging things they weren't ready to face. You held up a verbal mirror, and the reflection wasn't flattering. And instead of taking responsibility, growing, or admitting fault, they got angry. Because anger is easier than accountability. Anger feels safer than self-reflection. Accuracy is a threat to people who built their identity on avoiding responsibility. It reveals everything they tried to bury, the parts they hoped no one noticed, the behavior they justified, the intentions they masked with charm or blame shifting. Your words forced them to confront the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. That gap is where their rage came from. What made them uncomfortable wasn't your tone, it was your clarity. You saw them clearly, you named what they avoided, and you didn't back down. That level of precision is a nightmare for the insecure. It means they can't twist your words, can't pretend you're confused, and can't claim you misunderstood. You understood perfectly, and that was the problem. Your truth didn't attack their ego. It revealed its fragility, and fragile egos react the loudest when exposed. Their anger was the confession they didn't mean to give. Number 9, your voice recalibrated the entire power dynamic. When you finally decided to speak, the energy in your whole environment shifted, not gradually, but instantly. For a long time, people operated with an unspoken understanding of who you were supposed to be in the hierarchy. They were comfortable placing you in a lower role, not because you lacked power, but because you didn't actively use it. They assumed you'd always tolerate what they said, accept how they treated you, and go along with rules you never agreed to in the first place. Your silence made their authority feel legitimate, but the minute you opened your mouth with clarity, confidence, and truth, the balance they relied on vanished. Your voice didn't just express an opinion, it reset the entire dynamic. It reminded people that you weren't beneath them, behind them, or dependent on their version of events. You weren't someone they could control with assumptions or keep quiet with pressure. Suddenly, you weren't the underestimated one. They were the ones caught off guard. Your words exposed the fact that the power they thought they held was borrowed, not earned. It existed only because you allowed it to. Once you spoke, that illusion crumbled. They realized you didn't need permission to define yourself, and you didn't need their validation to stand your ground. You brought balance back to a system that had been lopsided for far too long. And the look on their faces showed it. They were stunned because they knew the hierarchy had been rewritten, and they no longer sat at the top of it. The moment you spoke, every unspoken agreement they built collapsed. There were so many silent expectations they assumed you'd follow without question. Keep the peace. Don't challenge the narrative. Don't expose the truth. Don't disrupt the comfort zone. But the moment you broke the silence, all of those invisible rules shattered. You dissolved agreements you never consciously accepted. You made it clear you were done participating in anyone else's script. You showed them that you were not someone to be directed or contained. And once those unspoken agreements collapsed, so did their ability to treat you the same way again. Number 10, you didn't lose people. You simply learned who couldn't survive honesty. When you finally spoke your truth, some people disappeared from your life, and it wasn't because you drove them away. It was because their presence depended on you being anything less than honest. They thrived on compromise, silence, and half-truths, on a version of you that was small, malleable, and safe for their egos. Your honesty didn't push them out. It revealed the fragility they had been hiding behind. You didn't change. The situation did. People who could only handle a comfortable illusion couldn't handle the real you, and that's not a loss. It's a revelation. Your truth filtered out the fragile egos pretending to be strong. These were the people who talked big, acted confident, and claimed loyalty, but in reality, their strength depended on you staying in a box they could manage. Once you stepped out of that box, their facade cracked. Suddenly, they were exposed as people who couldn't handle confrontation, clarity, or accountability. They weren't aligned with your integrity, they were aligned with their convenience, and your honesty forced them to make a choice, either adapt to reality or step aside. This process is rarely easy to watch, but it's necessary. Losing people who can't survive honesty isn't a tragedy, it's a clearing. It makes room for relationships that are authentic, grounded, and capable of real connection. It separates those who are genuinely committed from those who were only present for comfort or advantage. Your words became a filter, a natural selection of trust and authenticity. The moment you embraced honesty, you discovered the true nature of your circle. The people who stayed were the ones who could handle reality, who respected your integrity, and who were willing to meet you where you actually stood. Those who left were never truly aligned with you. They just hadn't realized it until you stopped bending for them. By speaking your truth, you didn't lose anyone. You simply saw them clearly. And that clarity is far more powerful than any illusion of loyalty. Number 11. When you spoke, people realized you understood more than you ever let on. The moment your voice finally entered the conversation, something clicked in people's minds. They suddenly understood that you had been catching far more than they assumed. They thought your quietness meant you were detached, uninterested, or oblivious. They mistook your calm for confusion and your stillness for lack of awareness. But your words revealed a depth of understanding they never accounted for. Every detail they brushed off, every attitude they thought went unnoticed, and every slip they believed you were too gentle to catch. You had registered it all. And when you finally spoke, it became clear you weren't behind. You were ahead. You weren't uninformed. You were informed enough to choose your moment. Their shock wasn't about what you said. It was about realizing you had understood the entire game the whole time. Your silence wasn't ignorance, it was surveillance. You were observing, studying patterns, reading behavior, and analyzing people's character long before you opened your mouth. You watched how they responded in private and in public. You noticed what they said when they thought you weren't listening and what they avoided saying when they thought you might be. You saw the inconsistencies, the hidden motives, the subtle disrespect, and the quiet manipulations. You didn't react because you were collecting information, not to use against them, but to understand them. Your silence was your strategy. It gave you clarity without conflict, insight without exposure, and knowledge without noise. People only realized this when you finally spoke, and spoke with the accuracy and confidence of someone who had been taking mental notes the entire time. Your words didn't stumble, they landed. They didn't guess, they revealed. And that's what made people uncomfortable. They suddenly saw that you weren't the unaware one. They were the ones underestimating the wrong person. Your silence had always been your power, not your weakness. And when you finally broke it, people discovered just how much you had already figured out. Your quietness wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hoped you'd never notice. Number 12. Your truth didn't just change the room, it changed the atmosphere. When you finally spoke, it wasn't just words filling the space, it was energy. The room itself felt different because honesty has weight. People stopped acting out their rehearsed roles. Their small talk lost its usual safety, and the undercurrents of tension became visible. The environment no longer conformed to the comfort zones they had built around themselves. Your voice carried authority not because it was loud, but because it carried clarity and conviction. It disrupted the invisible scripts people were following, and in that disruption, the energy shifted. You shifted the energy from keep the peace to keep it real. For too long, people were operating under the unspoken rule that harmony meant avoiding confrontation, masking discomfort, and tolerating quiet injustices. Your honesty made those rules obsolete. The peace they valued so much was revealed as a false calm, a fragile illusion that depended on silence and avoidance. Once you spoke, it became clear that truth was now the baseline. From that moment, interactions were no longer about avoiding friction. They were about confronting reality, acknowledging facts, and honoring authenticity. The impact wasn't just emotional, it was psychological. People who relied on control and manipulation suddenly realized the dynamics had flipped. They could no longer skirt around issues or maintain subtle dominance. Your words recalibrated how they navigated the space, how they positioned themselves, and even how they measured their own behavior. The atmosphere didn't just react to your presence, it reflected your standard. Honesty became the new energy, and everyone in that space had to adjust. In that shift, the unspoken boundaries changed. People could no longer rely on ignorance, politeness, or manipulation to influence outcomes. The energy demanded clarity, courage, and accountability. And in that transformation, you didn't just assert your truth, you set a new tone, one that made everyone else aware that pretense no longer ruled the room. Your voice didn't just speak, it rewired the energy around you. It replaced quiet compliance with raw authenticity. Number 13, they didn't expect you to speak because they mistook your restraint for weakness. For years, people assumed your silence meant you were passive, easy to influence, or incapable of confrontation. They thought they had you figured out, that your quiet nature made you harmless, agreeable, and unlikely to challenge them. They underestimated the depth of your awareness, the strength of your patience, and the intelligence behind your choices. To them, restraint looked like submission. They believed your calm was a signal of incapacity, not strategy. Now they understand restraint was simply a weapon you chose not to use, until now. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was deliberate. You were observing, calculating, and choosing the right moment to assert your truth with precision. Every unspoken word, every patient pause, every act of measured tolerance was part of a strategy they never saw coming. When you finally spoke, it hit with the force of someone who had been underestimated far too long. What they mistook for passivity was actually power on standby, waiting for the perfect time to be unleashed. Their shock isn't just about the words. They're stunned because they realize they misread you entirely. You were never compliant, naive, or powerless. Your restraint was always intentional, and your decision to finally break it proves that you've been in control the entire time. You weren't playing small, you were preparing. You weren't ignorant, you were aware. And you weren't weak, you were tactical. The impact of this realization is devastating for them. They now see that their assumptions were wrong, their manipulations ineffective, and their confidence in controlling you completely misplaced. Your voice didn't just correct misconceptions, it rewrote their perception of you entirely. What they mistook for submission was actually a silent storm, and now that storm has arrived. Your restraint wasn't absence of power, it was power perfected. Number 14. Your voice marked the end of their comfort era and the beginning of your authority era. The moment you finally spoke your truth with confidence and clarity, something irreversible shifted. People who had grown comfortable with the older version of you, the quieter, more patient, more accommodating version, felt the ground move beneath them. Their comfort era ended the second your voice entered the room with conviction. They could no longer rely on your silence to soften their wrongs, justify their actions, or protect their egos. Your presence no longer hugged their insecurity, it confronted it. Your words didn't just express how you felt. They redefined the entire landscape of how people were allowed to treat you from that day forward. Your authority era began not because you demanded power, but because you reclaimed what had always been yours. You started setting boundaries that weren't negotiable. You started speaking truths that weren't bendable. You stood in your identity with a steadiness that didn't ask for permission, approval, or apology. Authority isn't about volume, it's about certainty. And your certainty made people realize their old ways of dealing with you were outdated, ineffective, and completely unusable now. And nothing scares your enemies more than you stepping into a version of yourself they can no longer shape. They tried to mold you into someone predictable, agreeable, and easy to read. They liked you best when you doubted yourself, when you questioned your value, when you softened your voice to keep the peace. They depended on that version because it made them feel bigger, bolder, and more in control. But the moment you stepped into your true self, the version that knows, sees, speaks, and stands, they lost every tool they once used on you. Your new self doesn't bend to guilt. Your new self doesn't shrink for approval. Your new self doesn't hand out access without earning it. That terrifies them, because now they're facing a version of you built on confidence, clarity, and self-respect, the version they have zero influence over. You're no longer someone they can direct or dictate. You've become someone they must reckon with. Conclusion. Speaking up isn't just about saying what's on your mind, it's about reclaiming yourself. Every word you've chosen to voice has shattered illusions, exposed hidden motives, and recalibrated the dynamics that tried to keep you small. Your honesty didn't just rattle people, it redefined the space around you. It separated the real from the fake, loyalty from proximity, and strength from pretension. By speaking your truth, you forced people to see you clearly, not as someone they could manage or manipulate, but as someone fully awake, fully aware, and fully unshakable. Your silence wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. Your restraint wasn't weakness, it was power on standby. And your voice didn't just disrupt comfort, it created authority. You've shown that true courage isn't measured by volume, but by precision, clarity, and the unwavering decision to stand for yourself. Those who crumble under your truth were never meant to stay. Those who rise with it are the ones who belong in your circle. In every interaction, your words have become the spark that ignites awareness, the force that demands accountability, and the presence that shifts energy from compliance to authenticity. This is the era where you stop shrinking for anyone, the era where your voice, your truth, and your power cannot be ignored. Every word you speak moves the world around you because you've finally chosen to no longer be silent. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights. Like, comment, and share this video with those who need to hear the truth today. Your voice matters, and so does the impact it creates. God bless you.